The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It drummed against the metal roof of the garage like 1,000 tiny fists, relentless and cold. Marcus wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, leaving dark smears across the worn fabric. His fingers ached from the morning's work, a transmission rebuild that had taken twice as long as it should have. But that was the nature of his job. Every bolt fought him. Every part seemed determined to stay broken. He was 38 years old, stood 3 feet 9 inches tall, and had calluses thick enough to tell the story of every engine he'd ever touched. His daughter Lily was 7, a bright-eyed girl with pigtails that bounced when she ran, and a laugh that could light up the darkest corner of his world. She was everything. His reason for waking up. His reason for enduring the stares, the whispers, the casual cruelty that came with being different in a world that celebrated sameness. The clock on the garage wall read 5:47. Marcus peeled off his coveralls, revealing a faded flannel shirt and jeans worn soft at the knees. He washed his hands in the industrial sink, scrubbing until the water ran clear, though the grease under his fingernails would never fully disappear. It was a badge he wore without pride or shame, just evidence of survival. Lily was waiting at Mrs. Chen's house 3 blocks away. The elderly woman watched her after school, a kindness Marcus could barely afford but desperately needed. He paid what he could, and Mrs. Chen accepted it with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Charity dressed as commerce. He swallowed his pride every Tuesday when he handed her the envelope. The walk home took them past the new restaurant on Maple Street, the Azure Room. It had opened 2 months ago in what used to be an abandoned theater, all glass and steel and ambient lighting that promised sophistication Marcus had only seen in movies. Lily pressed her nose against the window as they passed, her breath fogging the glass. "Daddy, look how pretty." "It is, sweetheart. Can we eat there someday?" Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Maybe someday. When someday? When the world gets a little kinder, Lily Pad. She didn't understand, and he was grateful for that. Let her believe in some days. Let her believe the world had room for people like them at tables draped in white linen. The apartment they called home occupied the 2nd floor of a building that leaned slightly to the left, as if tired of standing. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen barely wide enough for 1 person, and a bathroom with a shower that only produced cold water on Thursdays. But it was theirs. The rent was paid. Lily had her own room with stars that glowed in the dark on the ceiling, a constellation he'd spent hours applying one Sunday when she was 5. Dinner was spaghetti with butter and parmesan. Lily chattered about school, about a boy named Tommy who could burp the alphabet, about her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, who was having a baby. Marcus listened with his whole heart, asking questions, laughing at the right moments, storing every detail away like precious gems. These moments were what life was actually about. Not the engines he fixed or the bills he juggled, but this small person across from him who still believed her father could do anything. After dinner, they read together. A chapter from a book about a girl who could talk to animals. Lily fell asleep before the end, her head heavy against his shoulder. Marcus carried her to bed, tucking the blankets around her small frame, pressing a kiss to her forehead that lingered longer than necessary. Back in the kitchen, he opened the envelope from work. $320 for the week. The rent was $400. Utilities another $100. Food, Mrs. Chen's payment, Lily's school supplies. The math never worked, no matter how many times he calculated it. He'd gotten good at stretching dollars until they screamed, but lately even that wasn't enough. The phone call came on Friday. A wrong number that became a right opportunity. "Is this Marcus Brennan?" The voice was male, professional, slightly hurried. "Speaking." "Mr. Brennan, my name is James. I'm an assistant to Miss Victoria Ashford. I understand you're a mechanic?" "I am." "We have a situation. Miss Ashford's vehicle has broken down approximately 40 minutes from the city. Our usual service is unavailable, and I was given your name by someone at Patterson's garage. Would you be available for an emergency call? The compensation would be substantial." Marcus glanced at the bills spread across his kitchen table. "How substantial?" $500 for the service call, regardless of the repair. He was quiet for 3 seconds. "What's the address?" The directions led him out of the city, into rolling hills where houses became estates and gates replaced front doors. Rain continued to fall, lighter now but persistent, turning the world gray and indistinct. His truck rattled over roads that had probably never seen a vehicle older than 3 years. He felt conspicuous, like a stain on expensive fabric. The estate appeared through the mist like something from a dream, or a movie about people who lived in different universes than his own. Stone pillars, manicured lawns even the rain couldn't diminish. And in the circular driveway, a black Mercedes with its hood up, steam rising into the wet air. Marcus parked his truck and grabbed his toolbox. A man in a suit approached immediately. James, presumably. "Mr. Brennan? That's me. Thank you for coming so quickly. Miss Ashford is inside. The vehicle simply stopped running about an hour ago." Marcus nodded and approached the Mercedes like he approached all broken things, with respect and curiosity. He spent 15 minutes under the hood, checking connections, testing components. The problem revealed itself quickly. A failed alternator. Common enough, but the part would need to be ordered. "I can give you a temporary fix," Marcus said, straightening. His back protested. "Get you running enough to make it to a proper shop, but you'll need a replacement alternator." "How long will the temporary fix take?" 20 minutes. Please proceed." Marcus worked quickly, his hands remembering movements they'd performed 1,000 times. Rain dripped from his hair onto the engine block, evaporating on contact with warm metal. He was tightening the last connection when he heard footsteps on gravel. "James, how much longer?" The voice stopped abruptly. Marcus turned and looked up into the face of a woman who seemed assembled from contradictions. Early 30s, dressed in casual clothes that probably cost more than his monthly salary. Dark hair pulled back in a way that was simultaneously careless and perfect. But it was her eyes that caught him, gray as the rain, sharp with intelligence, and currently widened in surprise. "You're the mechanic?" "Yes, ma'am. Marcus Brennan." She studied him for a long moment, and Marcus waited for the familiar sequence: surprise, discomfort, a forced politeness that couldn't quite mask revulsion or pity. Instead, she smiled. "Victoria Ashford." She extended her hand. He shook it, his oil-stained fingers dark against her pale skin. Her grip was firm. "James says you found the problem." "Yes, ma'am. Failed alternator. I've rigged a temporary solution, but you'll need a proper replacement." "How temporary?" "Get you where you need to go today. Maybe tomorrow if you're lucky." "That's better than I hoped." She paused. "You came all the way out here in this weather. The least I can do is offer you coffee. Or tea. Something warm before you drive back." Marcus hesitated. Accept charity or maintain dignity. But $500 bought a lot of dignity, and the rain had soaked through his jacket. Coffee would be appreciated. The inside of the house was exactly what he expected, and nothing he was prepared for. Space. So much space. Ceilings that soared. Art that probably had names he'd never know. Furniture that looked both comfortable and terrifying to sit on. Victoria led him to a kitchen that could have contained his entire apartment. Cream? Sugar? Black is fine. She poured 2 cups from a machine that probably cost more than his truck. They sat at a kitchen island, he on a stool that was just slightly too tall, his feet not quite reaching the footrest. "James mentioned Patterson's Garage recommended you," Victoria said. "I've never used them. Good shop, fair prices." "You don't work there?" "No, ma'am. I work at Miller's on 4th Street. But you do house calls?" "I do emergency calls, for the right price." She smiled at his honesty. "I appreciate directness. It's rare in my world." "What world is that?" "One where everyone wants something and pretends they don't." Marcus sipped his coffee. It was the best coffee he'd ever tasted. "Must be exhausting." "It is." She studied him with those gray eyes. "You have grease under your fingernails. Occupational hazard, never completely comes off. My grandfather had the same problem. He built engines his entire life, founded Ashford Industries manufacturing parts for aircraft. Started in a garage smaller than my bathroom. I didn't realize Ashford Industries began in aviation. Most people don't. We've diversified significantly. She paused. He died 5 years ago. Left me everything, including the expectation that I'd carry on his legacy. That's a heavy inheritance. Heavier than the money. She refilled both their cups without asking. Do you have family, Marcus? A daughter, Lily, she's 7. And her mother? Not in the picture. He didn't elaborate. Some stories didn't need telling. Victoria nodded, respecting the boundary. It must be challenging. Raising a child alone. It's everything. The words came out more intense than he intended. She's everything. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or kinship. I think I understand that. They talked for another hour, about Lily's love of animals, about Victoria's frustration with boardrooms full of men who saw her as her grandfather's mistake rather than his choice, about the rain in the city and the strange ways life put people in each other's paths. It was the easiest conversation Marcus had had with another adult in years. When he finally stood to leave, Victoria walked him to the door. The $500 James mentioned, she said. That seems insufficient for an emergency call in this weather. It's more than fair. Humor me. She pulled out her phone, tapped several times. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A bonus. For exceptional service. Marcus checked his phone and felt his heart stop. She'd sent him $2,000. Ma'am, this is fair compensation for your time and expertise. And Marcus? She smiled. I'm hosting a dinner next Friday for the Ashford Industries board and several business partners. I'd like you to attend as my guest. He stared at her. I'm a mechanic. You're a person I'd like to know better. The dinner starts at 7, the Azure Room downtown. I'll have James send you the details. Miss Ashford, Victoria, please. Victoria, I'm not. He struggled for words. People like me don't go to places like that. Her expression grew serious. Then perhaps it's time we changed what kind of people go where. Will you come? Marcus thought about Lily pressing her nose against that window, about some days and white linen tablecloths, about the quiet courage it took to exist in a world that constantly reminded you that you were other. I'll come. The week that followed existed in a strange state of anticipation and dread. Marcus told no one about the dinner, not even Lily, though he arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch her Friday evening. He cleaned his one good shirt, pressed his one pair of dress pants, shined shoes that had last been worn to a funeral 3 years ago. Friday arrived wet and cold. Marcus left work early, went home to shower and change. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw what he always saw. A man built from different proportions than the world expected. Too short, too different, too other. But Lily's picture on the bathroom counter reminded him why he was doing this. For some days. For possibilities. For the slim chance that the world could be different than it had always been. The Azure Room glowed like a jewel against the evening darkness. Expensive cars lined the street, sleek sedans and sports cars that purred with restrained power. Marcus parked his truck 3 blocks away and walked, each step a negotiation with courage. The entrance was all glass and light. A hostess stood behind a podium, blonde and elegant, and looking through him before she actually saw him. I'm sorry, we're closed for a private event. Marcus Brennan, I'm a guest of Victoria Ashford. Her expression flickered. Surprise, uncertainty, a quick consultation of her tablet. Of course, Mr. Brennan. This way, please. She led him through the restaurant to a private room in the back. The door opened onto a scene from another world. 20 people in evening wear standing around with cocktails and practiced laughter. Crystal chandeliers. Servers moving like ghosts through conversations. And seated at the head of a long table, Victoria, wearing a deep blue dress and a smile that found him immediately across the room. She stood and approached. Conversations died like dominoes falling. Marcus, I'm so glad you came. Thank you for inviting me. She took his arm naturally, as if they'd done this 100 times before. Let me introduce you to some people. The next 30 minutes existed in a blur of names and handshakes and thinly veiled confusion. Charles, who ran operations. Margaret, who handled legal, Robert, who did something with acquisitions. They all smiled and said the appropriate things, and Marcus felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, curiosity mixed with discomfort, politeness stretched over judgment. One man, tall and silver-haired, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, took Victoria aside. Marcus couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw the man gesture in his direction, saw Victoria's expression harden, saw her say something sharp enough to make the man step back. Dinner was announced. Victoria led Marcus to the table and seated him directly to her right. The silver-haired man, Richard, she'd introduced him as the board chairman, sat across from them, his expression carefully neutral. The meal progressed through courses Marcus couldn't identify. He used the silverware he saw others use, took small bites, spoke when spoken to. The conversations flowed around him, mergers and markets and matters he had no context for. He felt like an exhibit at a museum, the curiosity everyone politely ignored. Midway through the main course, Richard set down his fork with deliberate precision. "Victoria, perhaps you could explain the nature of Mr. Brennan's relationship to Ashford Industries. I'm certain I've missed the memo about our new partnership with automotive services." The table went quiet. Victoria's expression remained serene. "Marcus is my guest, Richard. That should be explanation enough." "Of course. Though one wonders about the appropriateness of mixing social and professional events, particularly when the guest list was specifically curated for business purposes. The guest list is mine to curate however I choose. Naturally. Though your grandfather understood the importance of maintaining certain standards." "My grandfather," Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass, "spent his life building engines with his bare hands. He believed that a person's worth had nothing to do with their appearance and everything to do with their character. If he were here, Marcus would be the first person he'd want to speak with." "Victoria, I'm not finished." She stood, and something electric charged the air. "My grandfather built this company from nothing. He knew what it meant to be dismissed, to be told he didn't belong, to have people look through him like he was invisible. And he taught me that the greatest failure in life isn't financial. It's the failure of imagination, the inability to see value in places we're not conditioned to look." She turned to Marcus, and her eyes held something fierce and certain. "Marcus is raising a daughter alone. He works 60 hours a week fixing broken things. He drove through a storm to help a stranger without hesitation. He's honest, kind, and one of the most decent men I've met. If that's not appropriate for this table, then perhaps we're all sitting in the wrong room." The silence that followed could have suffocated. Richard's face had gone red. Several board members stared at their plates. Marcus felt something enormous pressing against his chest, shame and gratitude and a wild, impossible hope. Then a woman at the far end of the table began to clap, slowly at first, then with conviction. Another person joined, then another. Within seconds, half the table was applauding, and Richard sat rigid with fury and defeat. Victoria sat back down, her hand finding Marcus's under the table. Her fingers were shaking. After dinner, they escaped to the restaurant's garden, a courtyard that defied the urban landscape around it. Rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and sharp. They sat on a stone bench beneath a pergola draped with wisteria. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. "That was unfair to you. You defended me. I made you a spectacle. You made me visible." Marcus looked at her profile in the dim light. "Do you know how rare that is? To be seen as a person first? Not a condition, not a limitation, not something to pity or fix. Just a person. You deserved better than that dinner. That dinner was the best meal I've ever had, and I can't remember what I ate." She laughed, a real laugh that shook her shoulders. "Richard will probably try to remove me from the board. Will he succeed? He'll try, but my grandfather's will was very specific, and I'm far more stubborn than Richard anticipates." She turned to face him fully. "Marcus, I need to be honest with you. I didn't invite you here just because I enjoyed our conversation. I know. You do? I'm not naive, Victoria. You're making a point. To them, to yourself, maybe to the world. Does that bother you?" Marcus considered. A week ago, I would have said yes, that I didn't want to be anyone's symbol or statement. But you know what I realized? We're all symbols whether we choose to be or not. The question is whether we let others define what we symbolize, or if we claim it for ourselves. And what do you symbolize? A father who loves his daughter. A man who fixes broken things. Someone who's learning that maybe someday is actually today. Victoria's eyes were bright. I'd like to meet Lily. You would? If you'll let me. No agenda, no statement. Just, I'd like to know the person who has a father like you. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. She'd love that. They sat in the garden until late, talking about everything and nothing. About childhoods and dreams and all the ways life never turned out how you expected but sometimes surprised you anyway. When Marcus finally drove home, he felt lighter than he had in years. The relationship that developed over the following months surprised everyone, probably including Marcus and Victoria themselves. She visited his apartment and met Lily, who immediately decided Victoria was a princess and treated her accordingly. Victoria sat on their worn couch and played board games and laughed when Lily beat her at checkers 3 times in a row. She invited them to her estate, where Lily ran through gardens and fed the koi in the pond and declared it better than Disneyland. Victoria taught her about the stars using a telescope in the observatory Marcus hadn't known existed. Lily fell asleep against Victoria's shoulder, and Marcus captured the moment on his phone, the image he would later frame and keep forever. But it wasn't a fairy tale. There were complications. Richard and several board members made their disapproval known through carefully worded emails and strategic leaks to business publications. A photographer caught Marcus and Victoria at a park with Lily, and the photo went viral, the billionaire heiress and the little person mechanic. Think pieces proliferated, some celebrating, some concerned, some cruel. Lily was shielded from most of it, but not all. A boy at school asked her why her dad was so small. Another girl said her mother called it inappropriate. Lily came home crying, and Marcus held her while his heart shattered into smaller and smaller pieces. Victoria showed up that evening unannounced. She sat with Lily and told her about her grandfather, about how people had told him he was too poor, too uneducated, too different to ever build anything that mattered, about how he'd built an empire anyway, about how the only opinions that mattered were the ones from people who loved you. Your daddy, Victoria said, holding Lily's small hands in hers, is the strongest person I know. Not because of what he looks like, but because he loves you with his whole heart. And that makes him a giant, Lily. The kind of giant that matters. Lily looked at her father. Are you a giant, Daddy? Marcus's voice broke. I'm trying to be, sweetheart. I think you already are. That night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus and Victoria sat in the dim kitchen, exhausted and emotionally raw. I can't give you an easy life, Marcus said. There will always be people who don't understand. Who judge, who make it hard. I don't want easy. Victoria's voice was fierce. I want real. I want someone who sees me as more than my last name or my bank account. I want to build something that matters with someone who understands what that means. Victoria, I'm in love with you, Marcus. I didn't plan it. I didn't even understand it at first. But somewhere between that rainy driveway and tonight, I fell completely in love with you and your extraordinary daughter. And I don't care what Richard thinks. I don't care what the board thinks. I don't care what strangers on the internet think. Marcus felt tears on his face. I'm in love with you too, and that terrifies me. Why? Because what if this doesn't work? What if the world gets too heavy? What if you wake up one day and realize the price is too high? She crossed the small kitchen and took his face in her hands. Then we'll face that day together. But Marcus, we don't get to opt out of life because we're afraid. Your grandfather taught you that. Mine taught me. And we're teaching Lily. She already loves you. I love her too. And I love you. So what are we going to do about it? Marcus pulled her down into a kiss that tasted like salt and hope, and all the futures he'd stopped letting himself imagine. The proposal came 6 months later on a Tuesday evening in his apartment. No grand gesture, no elaborate plan. Just Marcus on one knee in his tiny kitchen while Lily watched from the doorway with eyes wide as planets. "I don't have much to offer," Marcus said, holding a simple ring he'd saved 3 months to afford. "But I can promise you'll never doubt that you're loved, that you're seen, that you matter more than anything else in this world." Victoria was crying. "That's everything, Marcus. That's everything. Is that a yes?" "Yes, yes. 1,000 times yes." Lily screamed with joy and launched herself at both of them, and they collapsed in a heap of laughter and tears on the kitchen floor of an apartment that had always been too small, but suddenly felt exactly right. The wedding was small, just the people who mattered. Mrs. Chen, who cried through the entire ceremony. James, who served as Victoria's man of honor and looked genuinely happy about it. A few friends from the garage. And Lily, who served as flower girl and took her job with adorable seriousness. Richard didn't attend, neither did several board members. But enough people came who understood what this union actually meant. Not a billionaire slumming or a working-class man climbing, but 2 people who'd found something real in a world full of pretense. They kept both the apartment and the estate, split their time. Lily went to a school where the teachers saw her as a whole person. Marcus continued working at the garage, though Victoria eventually convinced him to partner with her in creating Ashford Automotive, a venture that focused on bringing quality repairs to underserved communities. It wasn't perfect. There were still stares, still whispers, still people who couldn't understand why someone like Victoria would choose someone like Marcus. But those voices grew quieter over time, drowned out by the louder truth of their love. 3 years after that wrong table became the right place, Marcus stood in the kitchen of their shared life, the one they'd built from the awkward, impossible, beautiful collision of 2 worlds that weren't supposed to touch. Lily was 10 now, reading at the table and occasionally looking up to ask questions that reminded him she was exactly as brilliant as he'd always believed. Victoria came home from the office, tired but smiling, and kissed him in that way that still made his heart race. She picked up Lily and spun her around, and their daughter shrieked with delight, and Marcus thought about that rainy driveway, about divine intervention disguised as a broken alternator, about all the ways life prepared you for joy by first teaching you survival. He'd spent 38 years being too small for a world built for different proportions. But love, real, deep, transformative love, had a way of rewriting the scale, of making you realize that the only size that mattered was the size of your heart. And his, it turned out, was giant after all. Hey there, friend. If this story touched something in your heart, if you felt the rain on that driveway or the weight of being seen for the first time, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what moment hit you hardest. Was it Marcus's courage? Victoria's fierce defense? Little Lily's innocent wisdom? Your voice matters to us, and every single comment reminds us why we keep telling stories about real people facing real struggles and finding real love. And if you're feeling it, hit that like button. It seems like a small thing, but it helps us reach more hearts, share more stories, and build this community of people who believe the world can be bigger and kinder than we sometimes remember. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing that love always finds a way.